Boy oh boy, I love a good showdown between Neblime and the Shambler. Let's see what happened on the day of the tournament as a bit of a warm-up game for our Shamble man, this time on Infinite Velocity. We have the Shambler's Terran in the mid-right of Infinite Velocity by the Beaver 99, and we have Neblime's Protoss, funnily enough, in the mid-left. So Neblime will be Protoss, Shambler will be Terran, and this must have been practice ahead of facing off against Hupsea, the Shambler looking for some Protoss practice, maybe feeling confident enough in the context of facing off against Jakulanski's Zerg, although should he have been, because that was a very competitive group. And Neblime already asking him some details, how Shambler feels about the situation. And if you missed March Invitational B, I'll include a link in the description below. You guys can check that out. It was a almost 12-hour broadcast, as they often are when we have the whole context of smashing out a bunch of tournaments and getting all the group stage stuff taken care of. And, you know, I'm always interested. I'm always interested. Neblime here giving some advice over to Jakulanski. Classic move. It's actually going to be a lattice opener here for Neblime. So if you're new to Cosmonarchy, you might be wondering what's going on here. Why do we have such a massive map? Well, we'll talk a little bit about the architecture of the map a little bit later, but the first thing that I should point out is that you don't have to go stockade first. Shambler's got a plan that involves infantry, but you don't have to do this. You can go for a fulcrum first instead. You can see him harvesting from the closer geyser. There's less travel time on the bottom geyser than there is on the top. And we do have that lattice about 75% of the way done, as Neblime is thinking about taking a scouting path across the map. But the main thing that you want to point out when you see a lattice is that you're going to see a lot of robotics units. Those are a little bit more swarmy in nature than Protoss typically is, so it lends to a little bit of a different playstyle. What we have here is an Atlas. This is a tech structure for Terrans, but in this case it burns down, and at 4 minutes on the clock without being touched, you obviously have a whole set of open paths here into this Nidus Caesiant, which connects the two bases. And the reason why the Huracan, the Firebat, was made first is because it actually applies an armor end. And of course the Atlas normally has 4 armor, but dropping it down to 0 with enough stacks of the Huracan attacks does mean that the Gauss rifle from the Maverick will deal full damage, which is a great DPS boost. So we've got this little bit of obviously a lot of typing between these players, but definitely a little bit of a bio push in the way. However, Shambler is busy typing instead of actually playing the game, and so he's actually going to lose a little bit of tempo moving across the into the Nidus here, if he even wants to go for it. No, it looks like he's going to settle in for a longer game by destroying the Nidus. It's funny, both players had the same idea of doing that, and that's Neblime's Scribe arrives just to see the Ministry come down. That should actually be a pretty big tell. We also have a Quarry coming up. The Quarry is an add-on you can add to your Ministry, which is going to occupy 2 worker production queues, if you will. Not only is the Quarry a worker production queue, but it blocks its production time, its build time, is the same amount of time that it takes to make 2 workers. So very similar to the Comsat interaction with Starcraft 1 Terran, where if you put down a Quarry, just like in Starcraft 1, if you put down a Comsat, you can expect to be behind 2 workers. However, unlike the Comsat, the Quarry actually makes workers, and so you can use it as a bit of a, get ahead more situation as far as the worker counts are concerned. Now, with the Mavericks and a Watchdog over here, there are no concerns from the Shambler. He is totally insulated versus this Vassal push, and this is also not something that, I wouldn't have put it past Hupsea to do this in the tournament. He didn't end up doing this in the tournament, spoiler, but I would have been interested to see more gateway-focused play. Although on this map, you might end up going into Stargate or something. So the Ministry lifts off. Off it goes. We already have the Nexus up here for Neblime, but he's a little bit behind in terms of worker production, adding a second lattice to spend his money a little bit more. We do have double Simulacrum. Now, the Simulacrum is a cute unit. When it takes hull damage, which it might do here against the Huracan, it actually splits. So Neblime wants to offer up his unit up a little bit so that it actually will end up splitting. However, the burn damage doesn't proc it. It has to be a deliberate attack. So that's a cute little interaction on top of it that Shambler ends up navigating around. Idle is going to go ahead and pop out of the lattice. The Huracan just making a full scout beeline. See if we can kill this one lonely Scribe over here. Meanwhile, we do have a pylon over here. Some antics brewing at 9 o'clock. The Scribe may end up dying, but not being microed too much here. The Huracan did get a faster movement speed increase recently, so it's a little bit more lethal in these types of situations, and I fully expect it to be a critical part of bio pushes going forward. Not that it ever wasn't, but it just a little bit more so. Takes quite a while to kill Ahmed, but eventually he is felled. Fulcrum being added next to the Vestry enabled stockade. The bio is now lurking around the natural expansion as a warden warps in behind here. This is just going to frustrate expansion attempts in the future. Obviously, you're going to have to commit to clear that. Maybe there's an opportunity for Neblime to abuse some kind of timing with his vassals by diving into a unprotected natural expansion and seeing if he can wreak havoc on the opponent. Treasury even coming down. That's probably going to be going down to that 9 o'clock position for Shambler. And both of our players, settling into a macro game. This is a map that uniquely affords those kinds of macro games because of its long distance. Something that was actually discussed on a layout standpoint is maybe the whole center of the map over here should be one giant ramp instead of being, just the ramps over in these locations. You can go for more flanking maneuvers, like maybe this area should be a ramp, and maybe there should be, more of a ramp focus onto these sides and stuff like that. So, there are possibilities. Wow, there's a very committed set of resources expended on these wardens. And particularly in this context, you can put like a phalanx over here or something and just shell them. But it is going to be a little bit before the Palladium is added on to the Fulcrum. That is the machine shop to the factory if you're using StarCraft 1 verbiage. Obviously, we have a bunch of new names over here. Neblime not yet harvesting from his 3 o'clock location, but that'll come online sooner rather than later. And as soon as this treasury ends up getting hit, it actually is going to complete the landing sequence. So, going to go ahead and go for the quarry. If I'm Neblime, it's actually going to get canceled before he even has a chance to do it. So there goes the treasury. It's not very durable. It's not very durable at all. So it's something to keep in mind. You definitely want to watch out for that. But of course, the Mason can repair it. It'll be just fine. It's a lot cheaper. I wonder if Hup will do anything with... No, it turns out no, not quite. Now, here's what I was talking about here. You can put like high range units on here. They get +2 weapon range shooting down. And so in this situation, the warden, that particular warden is as good as dead. Another one's been put down there. So very cheeky from our Protoss player. We also have a pretty big mech focus over here for Shambler. It's pretty customary to see something like this versus Protoss in the current meta, although I do think that Bio can hold a candle. You just need to maybe go into Savants or something. Finally, we've got an embassy coming for Neblime. He's keeping even with Shambler's worker count, despite having less worker production queues, but I guess the situation has been frustrated a little bit. Well, I say that, actually, I guess with the 3rd Nexus, he has the identical worker production queues, because this Watchdog here blocks the addition of another quarry. I just kind of assumed that Shambler would have had that. Vassals flying around. They've grown to a small number, but it's still something, it's still something. And here's a Palladium I was talking about there, a 2nd stockade, probably for another vestry, so he can continue to pump out clerics. Although I wouldn't mind some Hurricanes with this army as well. You can get a bit of a front line. And Goliaths do surprisingly good DPS if they can stay alive, sustained, for a very long period of time. The only concern with the position of Hurricanes is that because they're on the front line and they're going to take some damage, the clerics will be drawn to them. So you got to watch your army positioning. It's probably better to have the Hurricanes on a separate control group. And even just pumping out a lot of Mavericks in the mid game can kind of be useful for a force multiplier on your general. I would say, like, if you want to think about it in a certain way, you can think about it like the force multiplier on your DPS, assuming your opponent is busy attacking other units like the Goliath, which are maybe a bit more on the tanky side. And of course, the Phalanx itself, the siege tank from StarCraft 1, that's going to be used to just slowly clear this situation. Vassals are going to form a bit of a conga line. There are some Goliaths over here to deal with this, so even though he does a good job of trying to target select the vestry here, because that's one of the things you can't actually snipe with Vassals, since they're low damage and 0 armor pen means that you don't really want to target the stockade that has like 3 armor or whatever. The vestry is a better target for something like that. We do have a bit of a mass up over here. Now, these Wardens are finishing, but the Goliaths and the Clerics can absolutely deal damage to this. Now, here's the problem, though, is that there is actually a force to try to defend, and the split fire on this I don't really like. I feel like he could have focused down 2 out of 3 of those Wardens instead of sort of splitting his attention over there in terms of his focus fire. He still hasn't actually cleared this. I'm not sure if the Phalanx is making its way across the map, or... No, I guess not. It must have been... Where did it go? Oh, it's up here with the rest of the crew. Okay, I was wondering where that went. So that's a powerful unit to use, and you don't want to lose it, particularly to Vassals. Witness coming in for detection. We don't have any counter detection here, although Shamans that you can make from the Vestry add-on Stockade, the Shaman does detect. And here's a situation for all of you who are interested in figuring out details like how many workers do I need to saturate a base. The answer is 2 per node is baseline, and then 3 per node is full. But the 3rd worker per each mineral field is going to be less efficient. Anywhere from 50 to 60% as efficient as a baseline worker. And I say the range because, you know, some of the mineral fields are further away, like this one over here in the way back. So that will be a little bit less of a diminishing return, but still a diminishing return nonetheless. So this little outcrop is now finally cleared. It made Shambler take way longer than he probably should have to clear that. We've got vassals loitering around still, spying, and another base coming online. We did see the Ardent Authority come out. That is going to field certain details like the ever impressive Acantor. Instead of the Reaver, the Acantor actually works very differently. It doesn't construct ammunition, it just fires the projectile like any other attack, except it's a very high cooldown attack, and it's a dumbfire with a slow-moving projectile. And that slug, that torpedo, if you will, is indeed going to land and deal AoE damage, and it basically detonates on contact, right? So you can kind of think about it as a projectile with collision. So you still want to do things like hit the stop key when an Acantor drop hits your mineral line, and all your masons or whatever your worker is, if you're, you know, Protoss or Zerg, you hit stop on your workers and they decollide out of the mineral field, right? And then they can sort of like walk away normally. That can absolutely help you out quite a bit versus the Acantor. Now, here's another problem, though, is that we can see that this attack move could end up a little bit disastrously for Shambler. Thankfully, he reacts a little bit quickly, and the Simulacrum is the only unit to take the initial aggro. Neblime wisely using those fodder units just to scout out and see what the strength of the force is. Up in the top right, we see a prostration stage, second one nearing completion, the first one not active yet. These are very powerful Protoss structures. However, another point of contention here is the Atlas. The Atlas coming up is a pretty big key detail. That is going to afford Shambler Tier 2 tech, and that will allow him to get up access to another third of the tech tree, so to speak. And initially, not a bad engagement here. If this Cantor is microed well, yeah, actually, it looks like Shambler is going to be baited into attacking it underneath the defenses. He does kill it, but it gets 3 good shots off, and now the Goliaths are going to try to stagger step inward. The Positron, unfortunately, on a rally point instead of a attack move, not able to get too much value. And a good flank over here could do a lot. However, these Goliaths arriving a little bit later on are absolutely going to slow down and frustrate this move in, this collapse. I don't know that we can kill the Nexus. We don't have any armor penetration with the Shambler army, and he is going to need to cycle some of these Goliaths back to help with this force since he only has the 1 Phalanx. But the Scribes are all occupying some of those Goliaths. Even still, I feel like this engagement is still pretty good for Shambler. However, it's only a matter of time before these Clerics get focused down, and then the rest of the force is all just going to start to evaporate. A lot of these units are a little bit wounded, and here come Pariahs. Pariahs are very efficient at clearing out some of these mech-heavy armies because they deal splash damage with their attack, and they take a lot of pepper to bring down. At the same time, a pretty big worker massacre happened. Shambler has now taken the lead in workers and is taking the corresponding base on this side of the map, immediately starting to harvest Vespene. He's trying to focus down the Pariah, but it's just taking so much damage to put down. And finally, even though it does go down, he still only has, you know, a couple of Goliaths here, a pair of those, and a couple of Clerics left. And that is not going to be good for him to finish the push or continue the push. He had a bit of an outcrop of units over here. Probably could have maybe seen if he could send those in. A Mind Tyrant has been deployed on the battlefield, and that is a very powerful Protoss spellcaster. But as you can see, it doesn't move very fast. It actually moves slower than base Starcraft. So something else to point out, it can be caught. I'm waiting around to see what the Tier 2 Tekka's options are going to be, because right now, Shambler has been at Tier 2 for a little bit during that fight it finished, yet he doesn't actually have anything set up for it. So that's a little interesting. We still have this tiny outcrop there. I guess at some point another attack hit and destroyed some of those Wardens. Engram being rebuilt, this base did not indeed end up falling, and so Neblime can just comfortably continue to make workers and rally them on down. Double Mind Tyrant, we'll have to see how good Neblime's APM is in the middle of battle, but it suits his playstyle as the man who really likes to use Matroleths as Zerg. Again, no detection with this army, so the Witness is going to be an all-seeing eye. Vassals scouring the battlefield just to see what else is going on. This Witness not really moving around to do anything, but if it goes too close to the Atlas, it will be detected. Now, some really good Maelstroms to slow the mech army down is going to allow Pariahs and some similar units to catch up and get directly on top of them. There's no flanking possible. There's the Maelstrom yet again, doing a pretty good job of slowing things down. It slows as opposed to stuns in this game. We could see some mind controls, but it doesn't look like that's something that is within the repertoire here. There we go. We have a mind control come out there. Tyranny of the Sun being procced. And so now a Goliath has been added to the round of units here. A Mason randomly rallied over there. It looks like we still haven't really found too much action over here, but, you know, this Phalanx might sort of allow a stab into that base if that is something that Shambler wants to do. Servitors are being added to the repertoire. A Daedala immediately started, so I guess it's just a straight-up tech rush. He went from Atlas to Daedala. Nothing being added aside from a bunch of Sentinels down over here in this location. Bottom right being explored by Neblime. He does have a Crucible empowering these structures, allowing them to train units 25% faster. Definitely a good thing to get in the mid-stage of the game. Especially if you're struggling to spend your float, which it looks like Neblime is right now, adding 2 Argosies to the mix. Those are going to be used for heavy air. And does he want to charge on in and try to deal with some of these Sentinels? You can see with so many of them, there's 8 of them, and not really any artillery over here. The Mine Tyrants are going to be very useful versus the structures. If anything, they might get sniped here if it's something that Shambler is thinking about. But instead, we've got Mind Control. Honestly, it's not a bad idea versus the repairs. But here's the flanking force of a bunch of Vultures trying to take down a Pariah. You know, you see something new every day when you cast this game. Good Maelstroms, though, to catch and keep on the slow. Like, that's a really, really useful ability for when you're trying to make it happen. And so I think I have to tip my hat to Neblime for giving a good go of it. He is going to go ahead and continue to try to breach the situation, but the Ministry proving to be a very efficient wall in this situation. A single lobotomy mine stunned more of Shambler's army than anything else, but that's still good. And yeah, the Mine Tyrants have to be focused down here by if I'm in Shambler's shoes. That's what I'm worried about, because as soon as Neblime pays attention to this, he can absolutely get some good skill shots off here with the Maelstrom. Not interested in mind controlling, but, you know, it wouldn't be too much of a significant change anyway. The Pariah is still doing pretty good, you know, damage overall. They could have stopped these Sentinels from coming online. They might be able to kill, you know, 1 more at most. There we go. So we do have a couple Sentinels falling. The Golem staying alive for quite a while as well, as long as they were buddy-buddy. And a couple other units just sort of raining on in. I think that was a Servitor that ended up dying. Still working on the graphics for this game, of course. A lot of the models are brand new, like things like the Quarry and the Goliath. Meanwhile, there's a lot of graphics that are taken from other sources, like the Sentinel and the Treasury. And so eventually we'll have remodels of a lot more things. A lot of that is thanks to Solstice. We didn't see it at all in this game, but the Drakadin, the Dragoon, is thanks to none other than Balethal. He also did the Lan Effect, the Corsair. So there's a bunch of custom graphics ripped from different games, and also a bunch of custom graphics that are entirely bespoke to our own, and we're looking to pump up the numbers on the bespoke models in particular. So, curiously, Shambler's going to go for an Apothecary and double Iron Foundry. He's also adding a Ministry as he seeks to expand toward the bottom right. He has no idea that the Witnesses are continuing to provide plenty of intel to his opponent. And we do have double Argosy, like I mentioned. Another Ardent Authority going to be added out. I'm not sure I like the Sim City over here. You can see Golems being trapped in every now and then. I'm not sure they can fit between this. We do have Wardens being here for anti-drop. Worried a little bit about the potential for that. This force still standing guard. And the Goliath Vulture Cleric force, at 17.5 minutes in, when Tier 3 has already been achieved, is making its way around the clock to see if it can come all the way down to the bottom left. Now, I don't think Neblime is savvy to this, because even though he probably saw some of the army movements with the Witness, he doesn't know exactly where they went. And this base down here on the lower side of 3 o'clock, you can call that, I suppose, or sorry, 9 o'clock. You can call that something like 8 o'clock, I guess. The 8 o'clock location here for Neblime is going to be in jeopardy. He's going to have to get the Scribes out of there. That won't be super painful to lose like a ridiculous number of them or whatever. But, you know, if Shambler's not careful, he might not even get the Nexus, right? He's actually thinking about maybe taking charge and attacking into this force. So we're going to have to see what happens. It's like, you know, zombified Protoss in the Pariah exosuits versus all the Terran mech. It's an interesting choice. We've got the Empyreans here. The first phalanx of, or sort of order wall of mech has already fallen. And yeah, this is what you do, what happens when you're building, you know, tier 1.5 units like the Goliath and tier 1 units like the Vulture versus Protoss that has like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 units mixed in together. Compositionally, Neblime stands in a much stronger position. And yet, even still, he could have focused on the Nexus, and Shambler would have lived to be in a much better position here. He's thinking about what he wants to make out of the tech. He's been adding a lot of captaincy so he can spend some of his minerals down. And there's a nanite assembly on the way. We also have very, very powerful artillery infantry. Yes, that's right, the Silver Tongue. As well as some cuirasses. That's an interesting choice. Eventually this unit will be like twice as big and a very different model. But it's going to be a pretty cool situation to be in when that ends up happening. Ben. Terran players around the galaxy will rejoice. So Pariah's in the middle of the map. zoning things away. However, an Empyrean's been caught by all the Goliaths, and this is a situation where it's totally valid to make more Goliaths. Goliaths are excellent tools versus air. Golem spying the top right attempted expansion, but Shambler not yet saturating it. He's decided to go ahead and make a landing there after all. He still has this ministry that he could be taking his... yeah, curiously enough, he hasn't ever taken 4 o'clock, 4 or 5, whereas Neblime has definitely taken the corresponding bases on his side of the map. He's resaturated this base at 8 o'clock, and he's taking 7, which is the gas-heavy base. This is the base that you really don't want your opponent to be taking if you're worried about them getting a big push of general power here. So these 4 Goliaths can take down this Empyrean. We'll have to see if Shambler pays attention to it. He hasn't sent anything out to dispatch with that that golem. He says WTF. Oh, I guess at some point his ministry got shellacked. Or maybe he lifted it and moved it somewhere else. I'm not really sure what happened there. He's lifted this one. Maybe, no, that must have been intentional then. He must have lifted them because they're depleted or something. I don't know. I'm not sure what else it would have been. Not sure how else he would have been in that situation. He's got his ministries flying around. Yeah, I'm guessing it was probably a hotkey kerfluffle. So, absolutely baited. But you know what? He's going to return back. We do have the mech army coming on down with some bio support in Tier 2 bio and Tier 3 bio. Still only cuirasses from the Iron Foundry. Surprised we don't have any more heavy hitters. A Magnetar on the way out of the Nanite Assembly. That's going to be a very potent tool versus air stacks in particular. And it can also help you catch armies. You've seen the Mine Tyrants be sufficient for slowing down the enemy army. The Magnetar's attack, anything that it collides with, is pulled towards the Magnetar, so you can't really retreat from it as well as you would like. It is a pretty high cooldown, so you know the weapon attack speed or whatever is fairly low. So as a result, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing it take a little while. But yeah, Shambler is clearly in a bit of a state of confusion. He's not exactly sure what has happened to a lot of his units, and his first Magnetar is about to get attacked by these perfectly placed Empyreans. Now, it ends up surviving with about a third of its health. Karass over here trying desperately to get in range. But, you know, Neblime is also aware of this, presumably, and he ends up suffering a Yamato anyway. So that's a healthy amount of damage onto most of those units. You do have to watch out for that. The way Yamato works in this game is that it locks on to the target initially. It takes the target's position, but after that, you can move away from it. So you want to combine it with slowing effects, and you also want to combine it with other such effects, like you know, maybe targeting lumbering craft like the Empyrean. So this is a bit of a dangerous situation here, but you can see the Silvertongues cracking shots off from pretty far ranges. Once you get to a pretty healthy number of those, you can be in a nice spot as the Terran player versus this kind of thing, and that's the point where Neblime's going to have to think about engaging the ground army through some other means, like, you know, ground units of his own, which he does have in the middle of the map. He's even establishing a little bit of a forward outpost there. We still have plenty more units trying to step forward. The Madcap, the Dilettante, trying to do their thing as the Goliath stutter stepping over. This Empyrean very, very close to being able to win the day. There's an Anthelian coming. It's about 80% done. We got to keep our eyes on that because that can teleport across the map instantaneously. But currently, we're not actually seeing great usage of Neblime's ground army. He's lost a lot to this particular choke in the ramp. The Magnetar doing its best to finish off this target. Its actual DPS is not ideal, not spectacular, and yet it still was able to finish off that very wounded Empyrean. More of these units now amassing in the middle of the map. The Magister, a support unit, is capable of expanding the range of when it attacks something, it debuffs it, and units can target it from further away. So you can see these cuirasses are starting to melt a little bit compared to where they were before. Those Magisters are being focused down, though, and there's plenty more cuirasses where that came from. We still got 3 at a pop. 2 Solarians have completed, and I'm waiting for the Anthelian to pop into the fray. We don't actually know where it's going to be yet. It's currently idling right now. We'll have to see if it ends up getting selected at some point. But despite that, the Empyrean, yeah, they're staying alive a little bit here. We've got Paladins over here, which I'm a little bit worried about because they do deal friendly damage. But, you know, if you can get them on the stack of the Scribes, for example, they can be pretty efficient. Vassals are sowing discord and chaos over here. Finally, something the Cuirass can actually damage. And meanwhile, more Vassals over in this situation. I'd love to see the Anthelian be tasked over in this location to kill off all the Masons, by the way. It doesn't do it particularly fast, but, you know, it's not particularly slow with it either. So it feels like it's pretty efficient at sucking them all in. Ooh, Engram getting bopped. We've got ministries trying to be constructed over here, but Shambler's definitely in a bit of a state of chaos. He has not really not really regained control of the situation here. This middle base being taken on the low ground. We've got defenses being warped in all over the place. Vassals continuing to tickle. The Mason count falling. Now, this interior 4 o'clock location is going to be under attack, or I should say 8 o'clock location is going to be under attack. The Scribe's starting to take damage from the Paladins, getting even more increased weapon range down the cliff. So that's a base that's basically dead in the water. So we've got 2 bases here that are going to get completely wiped by the Shambler. That is not great for Neblime, and it definitely more than makes up for the harassment that was happening elsewhere on the map. We do see another Magnetar in production. We want to see if our players can mass up a couple extra secondary armies so that they can do a little bit more. And actually, Shambler hasn't committed to attacking that situation over there. He's going to try to target into this 8 o'clock base on the low ground. And he's going to be pretty sufficient at killing the Scribes over here, so that's pretty cool. And I guess maybe he'll even be able to fully finish that off. Some of his units are getting caught up on the ramp, but Shambler doesn't need to worry too much about the individual units at this stage. He has achieved a pretty high scale, and it looks like he's going to fork off some of his units to the back line just in case for, responding to a flank. This Nexus will finally go down, and at that point, I mean, you're going to talk about a lot of these Scribes going to get bopped here. However, the air army is posturing relatively aggressively over here. The Magisters are going to die. Looks like the Stewards were able to get shelled by the fully stacked Madcaps. Madcaps gain attack speed the more that they stand still and shoot. Every time they shoot without moving, they gain a stack. And that stack rapidly deteriorates once we get into a different territory. Oh, that Witness, I'm not sure what detected it. I guess it was the Atlas. More and more units trying to respond to all these like little minor threats here and there. Both of our players keeping their monies, I guess, relatively low in the grand scheme of things. Do we still have it? We just have a stack of 5 Anthelians. I guess this is something that Neblime is trying to test the theory for and see if he can just completely annihilate a bunch of units once he gets a critical number of them. But he's ceding a lot of ground, right? So that is a bit of a concern. Now we've got the warp in with just 3 of them. I don't know that that's going to be particularly good, especially with the Magnetar here, but hey, more of them are arriving. Okay, he was able to wipe that out. The Yamato came in and almost picked off one of the units. I don't know that they'll ever kill a Cuirass. That's my concern. The Cuirasses will remain alive forever. So he's actually got to evacuate these if he can. The Paladin is going to do some damage to his own units, but there you go. You could hear it. It was trying to move over here to kill off these Masons. That's not a bad shout. You know, it kind of works out. They did kill a Cuirass. That's shocking. But there's plenty of units to respond to this threat. This force in the middle of the map is going very, very well. This engagement here, we've got Goliaths, we've got Silver Tongues, we've got Paladins, Dilettantes, Madcaps. They're going to shred through all of the Stewards. And honestly, the Paladin shots are doing really well versus those Solarians. It looks like one of them will even die at the very end there. And the Silver Tongues are out over here. That's going to stop the Anthelians from being particularly efficient. Some of them are being trying to teleport away, but the Silver Tongues, despite taking some damage, are still going to be able to deal with that. And you can see here, it was not enough. He sucked in a Paladin, and that was able to go down to the friendly fire, but I still think he's in a pretty good spot. Now, the Architects are out. Those will deal pretty well versus some of these units, because they're guaranteed to get their procs off for the missile splits. So it looks like a couple of these Silver Tongues will end up going down. So you know what? I take it back. The middle of the map has been held. This base not exactly going to get finished off, but it was so expensive. Each one of those Anthelians is something like 500 or 600 or 800 Vespene. I can't remember. It's a lot of Vespene. Very, very high amount. So something to keep in mind as the dust has settled a little bit. We've lost all the workers at the interior 4 o'clock. 5 o'clock up and running for gas, but not capped and not really saturated either. And minerals starting to become a little bit more of a scarce resource for our players. Sure, the Empyrean went down, but a lot of damage got splashed out because of those Architects. And what do we have being produced now? More Anthelians. It's just more Anthelians. It's nothing else. Anthelians and Scribes. That's his play. Now, the Witnesses are doing a really good job of revealing shots for the Anthelians to dart in and out for them. However, I think the Terran in this situation is fine with this. Vassals were made at some point. I don't think those would be particularly good. The Cuirasses are going to be nice for trying to get up this ramp and allowing the Silver Tongues and the Paladin to maybe stab in. This base has finally been taken in the mid-left. Going to be crushed at the end of the day. We've got more and more things being constructed. Apothecaries. Not a bad shout at this stage where you want to just pump out a bunch of Dilettantes or something. Now here comes the horde of Anthelians just trying to dart across the map and delay that what feels like the inevitable a little bit over here. And as long as the Shambler keeps some of his army spread out a little bit, you know, like even just this distance, what are you going to do? Try to come in the middle? You'll just lose the Anthelians. So you got to kind of try to pick them apart. This base up here on the high ground will have defenses in its situation pretty quick, but here's a Magnetar. You can just depower the pylon at this point, and The scribes won't be able to do too much about that. Still, lots of paladins over here. This captaincy will eventually burn down if Shambler's not careful. Oh my god! I thought maybe he preempted the Yamato, but not quite. Not quite able to do that. Still gets a lot of worker kills in that situation. Neblime, uncharacteristically down workers. Double Iron Foundry going to add to this situation. We've got a third Apothecary being built in that little upper right base. And the Anthelians are back, trying to do their best to do what they can. They killed the captaincy, and they're out. Oh, never mind, not out. They're moving in a little bit deeper. The Watchdogs are able to do some damage to these guys, but there's a lot of them, so they will eventually be popped. And slowly, one by one, it looks like these Anthelians will indeed try to get out of this situation and come back to the forefront here. But remember, it's such an expensive investment. And even though he's sabotaged some of the mining, he's lost 5 out of his 8 Anthelians. He's lost another one down there. He might be trying to come down here, but the order gets canceled if you lose vision. You have to have vision. That's what these witnesses are there for. It's not like the battlecruiser teleport in Starcraft 2, where you can do it through Fog of War, which can be its own trepidatious experience as the Terran player, but usually feels more like bullshit for the other players. So, you know, camping around, stopping any additional bases from being taken, no 8 o'clock, no 7 o'clock. Hasn't been able to breach into the natural situation just yet, but he's doing okay versus the cliff defenses. He's going to come back in over here. We've got double Didact. Now, I wonder, there's 3 Star Sovereigns over here. I think we're going to see the trick shot from our Protoss player, or an attempted trick shot anyway, with the double Didact play. The double Didact can't be scouted unless you have detection, right? Because 1 Didact doesn't cloak itself, 2 Didacts do. So that's the idea there. But the Anthelians are definitely still going to be in a bit of an awkward position here. I don't know if they're going to be able to get out of that. Okay, well, more of them show up, so yes, okay. I was going to say maybe he'll end up losing one of them. Kind of being jerked around the map right now, but hey, this Anthelian is actually going to end up dying. A little bit unfortunate for it. We do have the bottom right finally being taken out here. No more Vespene for the Shambler in that location. And, okay, here's the recall. And there are 2 Star Sovereigns in this situation for the recall. So this is still a pretty lethal situation. Obviously, the glassing is going to catch some of the Masons and the Ministry. So he's going to have to lift off the Ministry if he can, but doesn't look like he's going to do that. He lifted off 1 Apothecary. And he doesn't really have a critical mass of units over in this situation. But again, Neblime doesn't really have anything. As soon as his Anthelians pop, he's got nothing back at home for defense. And he's not really splitting them off to try to occupy things. Now, it's still a very scary situation, but the Paladins and Cuirasses are here. It does feel like maybe they'll be able to do what needs to be done to hold this one off, although the Nanite Assembly is being focused down. We even have Silver Tongues over here. I would be trying to focus down that Star Sovereign that's doing the glassing. It is going to be able to kill the Nanite Assembly, unfortunately, for Shambler. But hey, the Paladins and Silver Tongues are paying off in this situation. Goliath's unfortunately walking into the glassing zones. And there was an attempted recall. Don't know where that recall went. I'm trying to look around for where it might have been. Oh, okay, he recalled them further away just to see if he could get them out, since that's the only way you can actually move those units once you get into the territory of them glassing. So he still has 1 Star Sovereign. That's like a trick shot, but for defense. And it looks like he might have been able to narrowly hold back at home. This is a very messy game. This is a lot of stuff going on in this match. Neblime trying to pull out all the Protoss tricks, but I don't know that it's working out for him. This base wasn't providing too much, but I guess that's enough for Shambler. He's out of here, and he ends up cutting it at that point. So there you go. Neblime reigning victorious with some cheeky Protoss strategies. If you're wondering what Shambler could have done to deal with that situation, I think as soon as you see the Anthelians, you definitely want to invest in more Silver Tongues, but it took him a very long time to add more Apothecaries to his army. He never capped that base in the bottom right, which he was getting a lot of Vespene from, and he never even fully saturated it. So that's another missed opportunity there. When you have a longer game going on, and this was just a warm-up before he got into the tournament, so that's why he ended up leaving. He didn't want to tire himself out, at least that's what he said. I do think that when you have a longer game like that, it can be difficult to remember. You'll get lost in the sauce. What am I supposed to do? Okay, what is giving me the most grief? These Anthelians are jumping around, being pesky. You could add a lot of watchdogs to the areas that they keep jumping around into. Definitely could make some detection to clear out the witnesses to stop them from being able to jump around. That would definitely help out a lot as well. And then beyond all that, I mean, like, one thing that sounds silly but could be done is if you build a treasury, build a lodestone, put some silver tongues in there. Just saying that would probably clear out a lot of stuff because it detects the witnesses, and obviously it gives them even more range. So that's another option, but that requires a bit more setup. So I would understand if somebody's not going to do all of that in the middle of it. There's definitely a lot of things Shambler could have done, and he's just never been in a situation where that's being used against him like that before. So it does feel like Neblime won with all these kinds of silly tricks. But when you understand how to counter those things, and when you understand how much of an expense it was, where he completely ceded control of the ground army and relied only on his static defense, and sure, that kind of worked out. But if there were more silver tongues to wipe the offense, Neblime would have had to GG out a long time ago. Anyway, that's going to do it for this cast. Hope you guys enjoyed seeing some silly stuff. We'll be back tomorrow with more Cosmonarchy.